Hi and welcome back to my channel. In this video you have a project wrap-up, a combination project wrap-up of two different projects that both sort of petered out. One was far more successful than the other. Now I'll talk about the one that was not as successful, and I was thinking about, before I sat down to film this video, what was the reason why my SCASL project sort of petered out for me, and I didn't even end up reading the final two books of the middle grades list. I kind of forgot. I thought I'd read them all and was going to do a wrap-up video and just kept procrastinating on it. But then I print off book stickers, like book cover stickers, to put in my reading journal. And I found two of them and went, oh, I never ended up reading those, which is not so great. But I had high hopes for my SCASL project. And I just realized I was giving an intro and then I sort of went into talking about SCASL. Let me back up a little bit. So I'm going to talk about my SCASL project, wrap that up. I'm also going to talk about my book box battle. I went through a different series of names for that one, and I'm going to wrap that up and give you my thoughts on all of these different subscriptions. Although I do not have the final statistics with me, I do remember which ones were above or below the cut line. So let's back up to SCASL. As I was thinking about and preparing for filming this video, I really could not figure out what was it this year that made me less engaged with this project and with these books. I think part of it was the fact that even though I wanted to start early and I knew the books earlier than in years past, I tried to split them up and divvy them out amongst the months. And by the time I was reading those, I wasn't really into them. And then it ended up taking so long that I lost steam on completing the project. Also, overall, there were not a lot of great standout books this year. I did pull two books that I have recently purchased. Both of these are from the young adult list. There is Vinyl Moon, and then you have African Town. Both of these are told in verse. Size, they're very different. These were both absolutely excellent 5-star reads. I discovered several 5-star reads on the young adult list, and overall I think young adult performed a lot better for me this year than in previous years. Like usual though, there were some complete and utter duds on the list. Things like All of Us Villains did not work for me. The one about something about the Lies Like Wildfire, the Karen M. McManus book for the year, the Enduring Freedom book, those all were duds for me. But overall though, I discovered some really good ones. As far as the middle grade list goes, I do have, I think, two books from the middle grade list on my wish list to purchase. One of those being Worst Case Colin. That was hands down the best book that I read out of that grouping for this list. It was phenomenal and it took me completely by surprise. Most of the rest of them, however, were mid. And I think because so many of these books were so mid, there was nothing good about them, there was nothing bad about them, they didn't stick in my brain, and there were some that were not great. I lost interest in the project. Now, does this mean that I'm going to stop reading the SCASL nominees every year? No. I started doing this, I think, 7 years ago with just middle grade. Who knows? I might go back to middle grade, but the thing that keeps me from going just solely to middle grade is the phenomenal gems that I discovered this year in young adult, and also the fact that at the middle grade level, 6th to 8th grade, you have such a wide range of reading levels, interest levels, etc. And some kids, like in 6th grade, they might be able to handle YA type books. Probably not, but especially at 8th grade though, there's a lot that would be able to handle that. And I think next year, I may or may not do a video project for it. I don't think I'll do a specific dedicated project for those books, but I probably will at least mention them, mention which list they're on, talk about them, and I may actually search out potentially other middle grade lists. Potentially there are other states who do something like South Carolina does, this library association in my state, because as you well know, Goodreads got rid of the middle grades and children category this year, and I don't foresee them bringing it back, which I have discovered so many amazing books because through lists like these, through SCASL, through reading the nominees for the Goodreads list, because I don't necessarily know where else to find them, which is why it's such a travesty that Goodreads got rid of that list. And some of my favorite middle grades I have discovered because of that. So hopefully, maybe Goodreads will bring it back. I definitely will be reading the lists next year, but I don't think I will make a project out of it. The other project that we are going to talk about is my BookBox subscription project. That one went exactly as intended. I was able to read through a lot of books for my subscription, which ended up helping marginally for preparing for the Goodreads Choice Awards project that I had at the end of the year. Although, if I had been more caught up, I would have read more that were published this year. I was so backlogged on some of the series that a lot of the books that I was reading were from last year. So, let's talk about them in alphabetical order. That's how I structured this, and I was able to find at least one book from all of these subscriptions, including the ones that I've canceled. So let's start alphabetically with the one that had the shortest tenure, and that by now you know I have unsubscribed from. Out of all of the books that I got from this company, I have kept one, and that was The Magician's Daughter. This book is amazing. It is one of my favorite books this year. It's definitely one of my 5 stars. It's not like top 10 material, but it's fantastic. And I don't think I would own it, and I definitely wouldn't have read it if I hadn't subscribed to Aardvark. However, most of Aardvark's selections do not appeal to me at all. I DNF'd 2 of them, I think, and didn't really enjoy the others. I think one was sort of middle of the road. I have unhauled all of the other Aardvark books that I've gotten. I have canceled. There were several months where I didn't even pick a book. This one, it was an easy way for me to say, no, I do not need this subscription. So this goes on the canceled side. Next, we have a very similar type of subscription model, marginally customized, much better selection, and that is Book of the Month. And I had a lot to choose from Book of the Month. Now, have I kept all of my Book of the Month books? No, I have not. I've actually unhauled a couple. Not nearly as many as Aardvark. When I was looking at my list, I was thinking, which ones did I read this year and at the end of last year? Which ones did I absolutely love? And there were several. As I look over at my shelves right now, I have 8 books besides this one that I have not pulled out. And then over on my nonfiction shelf over there, I have a couple more, including what probably will be my top nonfiction book of the year, Killers of the Flower Moon, which I got through Book of the Month. And this one was phenomenal. This is magical realism. This was on the Goodreads Choice Awards list last year. It was in the historical fiction category, so I didn't read it last year. But this was just so well done. And I've heard people talk about other works from her, and I'm interested in them. But overall, I love the wide variety of selections that you can potentially get from Book of the Month. And especially when it comes to the Goodreads Awards, being able to say, oh, I know about that book. I own that book. Potentially I can read that book, or I have read that book. I'm really excited. Obviously, you have seen the shelf behind me in my other filming location full of Book of the Month books. Speaking of new projects, I might start an ongoing project next year of trying to read more of my Book of the Month books. So this goes in this is a definite keeper. And of all the scores, Book of the Month scored the highest. Then we get to one that underwent a transformation this year, and that is my comics subscription. So as I was reading through a lot of these, I hadn't fallen as far behind, but I was discovering that some of the material and some of the graphic novels, etc., were not exactly to my taste. They weren't the type or the style that I enjoyed. I switched several of those. Some months I switched out for the kids version of the subscription, and those were huge hits in my book. And so midway through this past year, I switched from the normal regular subscription to the kids subscription and have had only one dud out of those. I've unhauled only one of those as opposed to unhauling several of the adult subscription. This was definitely a standout. If I had looked for the Dan Santat book, I loved that one, and it did win either the Newbery or the Caldecott, which is phenomenal. So this definitely is a win, although it was a transformation. If I'd stayed at the adult subscription, I would have canceled it. And if the kids subscription had not been successful, I would have canceled that subscription. Next, we come to one where I absolutely love this subscription, but it was a little bit difficult for me to find one of the books that I had held on to, because this is one where I have accidentally, multiple times, duplicated the book. And so I kept the fancier edition of the book, but read the Caffeine and Legends version. But this is one that I did actually keep. And I really enjoyed this. Was this my favorite out of all of the Caffeine and Legend books? No, but this is one that I had. Some of my favorites, I had a fancier special edition from a different subscription, and so I kept that one. But I really enjoy the Caffeine and Legends subscription. I think it is curated really well. As you may have known, I have had a different coffee and book subscription, but of those, I kept hardly any of those. Some of them, I pulled them out of the box. I'm like, there is no way I'm ever gonna read these. And so that was a quick, I'm canceling this. And I think that was at the end of last year that I canceled it, or maybe the beginning of this year. And I found this one and I love it. I love that there are a handful of little bookish goodies that come in every box. I love getting the coffee. They curate it well. And I really do enjoy the books that they choose. I don't think that, aside from the duplicate copies, that, oh, there is one that I have unhauled that was not a duplicate copy. See, coffee on the brain. And that was the Terraformers. That is one that I DNF'd, and it really hurt me to do that because I love this subscription so much, but there's only one of those. And it's a matter of learning my own taste. And now that I know my taste a little bit better as I've been thinking about it and analyzing it, I know now that I need to skip months like that, even though I like the coffee and the other things. This is definitely in the win column. Caffeine and Legends is actually the only subscription that I get that comes with extras. Next we have Fairy Loot, and I get two of their subscriptions. One, the Fairy Loot Adult, the other, Fairy Loot Young Adult, their regular box. I have unhauled, I think maybe 3, possibly just 2 of the subscription. I've gotten it since February, I believe, because I think that the last one that I did not get was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. And I'm thankful that I was not subscribed in that month, because that would have been one that I would have unhauled, but it's an absolutely gorgeous book. The first one that I got, I started it in March. First one that I got was The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi. It's difficult to get books off that top shelf, which is why I didn't pull that one down. They are gorgeous. I'm glad that I'm subscribing to the Fairy Loot Adult subscription now, as opposed to when they first started, because they have stepped up, majorly stepped up their customization game. The one that I did choose is one that apparently is controversial and not liked amongst bookish circles. A lot of the Goodreads reaction videos that I've been seeing have talked about how all they've heard is negative, and I'm like, you apparently didn't watch my video because I gushed about this book. This was a 4.5-star read for me, and it did win in science fiction, which no one really expected. I did not expect this one to win in science fiction, but there were not a lot of traditional science fiction books in that category this year. I'm leaving that alone because this is not a Goodreads Choice Awards video. This is a book box subscription video. I really enjoyed the customizations that they did with this one. They changed the colorway. It's fully decked out with the image, like the imagery continues. The problem that I had partially with Fairy Loot Adult is that so many of their picks were romantasy. 1 or 2 of I think 2 of their picks are actually in the romantasy category of the Goodreads Choice Awards. And that is not a subgenre. That is my favorite. That's not a preference for me. And so, yes, I read those, and I'm going to read, the other one is The Hurricane Wars. that I have, they are starting a new Romantasy subscription. So potentially we're going to get more of these and things like The Adventures of Mina al-Sarafi in their adult subscription. So I am still keeping this one, even though I have DNF'd so many. The customizations are on point, and I have not DNF'd, unhauled so many. I lost track of that sentence. Let me start this one over again. I'm keeping the subscription even though I have unhauled so many. Their customizations are on point, and the ones that I have kept, I have loved and adored. So this is definitely a win, not as strong necessarily as some other categories. Next, we have another Fairy Loot subscription, and that is the Young Adult. And for that one, I chose Threads That Bind by Kika Hatzopoulou. This was a surprise for me. I really enjoyed this one. This also was on the Goodreads Choice Awards list. Their customizations have been stepping up, definitely over the past year or so, especially compared to other ones that I've seen. So I love it on the customization front. As far as the customizations go, I do not think I have unhauled all that many of the regular Fairy Loot. I've unhauled a couple that I can remember, but not all that many. And for the most part, I rate my Fairy Loot books at a 3.5 stars or above. Vast majority of them have been 4 stars and have stayed in my collection. I had an overabundance of books that I could choose for this. And another thing that I love about having these subscriptions, either one, grants me early subscriber access to their special edition sales, pre-sales, and I've gotten some stunning books, stunning special editions of books that I love, like the Elizabeth Acevedo books and the As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. So for that reason, I'm definitely keeping my Fairy Loot subscriptions. I am, however, making more judicious use of my skips, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. Next, alphabetically, comes Goldsboro. I have had, you could say, a mixed experience with Goldsboro books. There have been some that I have DNF'd very quickly and unhauled. There have been some that were middling and I unhauled. But for the most part, I have really enjoyed all of the Goldsboro books that I have gotten. For this one, I have chosen Shield Maiden. This is my favorite out of all of the Goldsboro books that I have read. I'm hoping that The Witch and the Tsar is also good because Jade from JD Ray Reads loves that one and our tastes are very similar. I loved Shield Maiden. The thing about Goldsboro that I have to keep in mind is the cost. They are one of the more expensive of the book-only boxes, and so whenever there's an overlap between their books and another subscription, like Illumicrate, like Fairy Loot Adult, I have chosen to skip Goldsboro in most of the cases because they're about $7 or $8 more expensive. Yes, some of that expense comes from the fact that it's based in the UK. Fairy Loot, Goldsboro, and Illumicrate are all based in the UK. So that's going to change the shipping costs for myself. It would be different if I were in the UK for these subscriptions. But I do enjoy the diversity that you see in a lot of the books that they choose. So Goldsboro is definitely a keeper for me. The one that is the most mixed bag of the book subscriptions that I'm keeping is Illumicrate. So I have chosen what I think is one of their most stunning editions and one that I've kept. I talked about this in the Book Battle subscription about the fact that I've had to unhaul so many absolutely gorgeous, stunning books that I've read from Illumicrate this year because they just did not work for me. Some I actively disliked. The Lies We Sing to the Sea. Some were just fine. And I had a thought of which one that was, but I don't remember which one. It pains me because, again, Illumicrate is a UK subscription, so the shipping jacks up the cost. But they have such gorgeous editions, and I am a sucker for a pretty, gorgeous book. So I am keeping them, but they are kind of on the chopping block, but only partially. Again, like with Fairy Loot, having subscribed to their book box gives me early access to their special editions as well. And like I have my Yellowface edition is the Illumicrate version. With the special editions, I purchase only if I have read the book and liked it, or it's a sequel to a book that I've liked. But Illumicrate is staying on the list. We are bookending this BookBox Battle subscription with the other subscription that I'm not keeping. And that is the one from TBR. This one, by far, has had the worst customer service. And that is one thing that has, and it's continuously kept its scores low all through every single one that I read from them. And I've unfortunately had to unhaul a lot of them. It took me a while to find one of their books that I had actually kept and remember it being on the subscription. I've read a lot of books that I wouldn't have otherwise, but also a lot of them were duplicates. The hassle with the customer service and getting the duplicates, and now their prices went up. I had tentatively planned to get one last quarterly box from them, but then I got the email talking about raising the prices and giving a paperback option. And so first off, I switched to the paperback option because it was a couple dollars cheaper than what I had been paying, but it was for paperbacks instead of hardbacks. And then I thought about the fact that I've had so much trouble with them. In order to not get duplicates, they put it all on you to make sure you keep up with your Goodreads and make sure that all the information is accurate there so they don't get you duplicates of other subscriptions. Which on one hand I understand, but also the books that are in these subscriptions are actually fairly well known. I'm not going to get more into that, but I'm like, this is a lot of extra work for nothing special about the book. These are generic books that I could go to the bookstore, pick up off the shelf, and purchase. There's nothing extra. The Caffeine and Legends does the nothing extra as well. However, they have added amenities in their box that I really appreciate. Aardvark, which I'm not keeping, and Book of the Month have marginal additions to their books, which makes it a slightly separate category. And so I went ahead, even after switching to the paperback version, and canceled this and did not get another last quarter because their scores overall, how I scored them, were so low. I wasn't going to keep them anyway. So that leaves, out of the 9 that I have been looking at this year, I'm keeping 7 of them and getting rid of 2. But the other thing that it has led me to do is become more judicious in looking up the book ahead of time and deciding whether or not I want to keep it and making sure that I do not get duplicates. And choosing to use my skip policy, not my skip policy, the skip policy of the subscriptions, to avoid books that do not look like they're going to be for me or that I'm getting duplicates of, and thus rein in my overall book subscription habit. And that has come in quite helpful. So I am definitely keeping all 7 of these subscriptions, but that also leads to the fact that I have a few new subscriptions that I have not started analyzing. First of those is Broken Binding. I have a box sitting right over there that I need to unbox. There's also Inkstone, which is a quarterly subscription. Broken Binding kind of is a quarterly subscription because every quarter there's a new series, but you get a book every month. Being subscribed to Broken Binding also lets me have access to their other special editions, which are phenomenal. I'm also subscribed to B, as in BEE, Red, the new LitJoy quarterly. I'm getting that for a year anyway because I went ahead and did the yearly. I'm going to try to read the books that I get, the 4 books that I get from that, or at least 3 out of the 4 before it renews to see if I'm going to keep that. And I'm also getting, I think those are the 3 new ones that I need to take a look at and evaluate on whether or not I'm going to keep those. Overall, you can tell by the fact that I spent much more time talking about my BookBox project that I had a lot more success with that project and learned a lot more through doing that project. But thankfully, after doing that project, I ended up deciding to keep 7 of the subscriptions and getting rid of only 2. I'd say that overall is a win. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.